What's up, current ancestors? I hope your days have been going well since the last time. Man, oh man, I'm excited to share this one with you because this is one of my favorite myths. It's the Epic of Gilgamesh. So you don't have to read it, but you can. But you don't have to because I'm going to tell you the whole story as accurately as possible as I can right here. So let's not waste time. Let's go straight in. So Gilgamesh was the king of Uruk, and I do believe this was a real person. Uruk was one of the first major cities in human civilization dating back to 4000 BCE during the Sumerian dynasty. It's the oldest civilization that we know of. It's located in what today would be southern Iraq. It may have been the world's first mega city. In its height, it is believed to have housed about 40,000 to 80,000 people. Now, that's a lot for back then. Now, the Epic of Gilgamesh starts post-flood. And I mean post-flood like the biblical narrative for context. Remember, every myth has a different version. I will tell you this as accurately as I possibly can with the sources that I have researched. So I'm not freestyling, but I am to make it make better sense so everybody can understand it. So, long before Greece, long before the Bible was written, long before empires ruled, there stood a city like no other, Uruk. Its walls towered over the lands, its temples stretched towards the heavens, and its people believed that the gods walked close to them. Over this city ruled a king, and not just any king. This was a man said to be 2/3 God and 1/3 human. His name was Gilgamesh. Gilgamesh is a powerful man beyond measure. Like I said, 2/3 God, 1/3 human. So, Gilgamesh, like I said, is as powerful as anybody could think of back then. And he was standing at 18 feet tall. No man can match his strength. He builds the massive walls of Uruk himself, commands armies, and expands civilization. But power changed Gilgamesh. The same king who protected his people crushes them under his will. The people cry at night. The men are exhausted by his demands. Families fear him, and no one can oppose him. Before any groom was given the right to their bride, first the bride must beg Gilgamesh on the wedding night. That's mad right there. So the people start to beg the gods for a relief from this tyranny. They need relief from their king. The gods heard the people's cries, and the goddess Aruru took clay and shaped a wild man from the wilderness called Enkidu. Enkidu lives apart from civilization, roaming the wilderness with gazelles, living amongst the animals and covered in hair as they are. Then one day a trapper sees him after noticing that every trap that he would set for animals was destroyed. The trapper was struck with fear at the sight of Enkidu, and he returned home to his father to tell him of what he witnessed. His father tells him to go to Uruk and tell Gilgamesh of what he saw. So the trapper travels to Uruk, and he tells Gilgamesh that he has seen a man comparable to the might of the king. Gilgamesh listens carefully and gives the trapper a plan, instructing him to take Shamat, a temple priestess, with him to seduce the wild man, who will surely fall to the temptations of a beautiful woman. The trapper returns to the wilderness with Shamat, and they wait by the watering place until Enkidu appears. Once Enkidu appears, Shamat reveals herself, and Enkidu is immediately drawn to her. The two remain together for 6 days and 7 nights, and when it is over, Enkidu tries to return to the animals, but they all flee from him. His knees weaken when he tried to run with them. The wild creatures no longer accept him. Seeing Enkidu's confusion, Shamat comforts him and tells him he is beautiful now, like a god. She then clothes him and brings him among the shepherds, showing him the way of human life and for the first time, Enkidu is a part of human civilization. While amongst the shepherds, Enkidu hears the news of a wedding taking place in Uruk, and hears of what Gilgamesh intends to do by bedding the wife first. Enkidu understands humanity enough at this point to recognize this is just an injustice. So he becomes angry at the sound of this oppression and leaves for Uruk. So this is Enkidu's first time entering the city, but he isn't overwhelmed. He notices the wedding preparation starting to take place, and as Gilgamesh proceeds to enter the house, Enkidu steps in his path and challenges Gilgamesh. The two clash through the doorway into a legendary fight. Eventually, Gilgamesh wins the struggle by just a smidge, and then something unexpected happens. The two start laughing because they both have never met anything else equal to themselves. Just like that, enemies become brothers. After the battle, the two became inseparable, and Gilgamesh insisted that they solidify their glory by defeating the giant Humbaba, who possesses dominion over the cedar forest and is empowered by the head god, Enlil. The cedar forest was connected to the gods and sacred territory protected from mankind. Enkidu at first hesitates, and Gilgamesh tells him that men die, but their names can live forever. Unlike Gilgamesh, Enkidu remembers the wild and knows the dangers that they may face. But Gilgamesh persuades him, and the two prepare for the journey. Before leaving, they go to the elders of Uruk, and the elders warn them Humbaba is dangerous. But Gilgamesh refuses to turn back. Then Gilgamesh visits his mother, Ninsun, the mother goddess, and she senses danger, but knowing her son, she prays to the god Shamash for Gilgamesh and Enkidu's protection on their journey. The two forge enormous weapons and take off into the cedar forest. The journey is long enough for fear to slowly creep into Gilgamesh. He starts having nightmares of mountains shattering, storms raging, earthquakes, and monstrous wild animals. The mighty Gilgamesh becomes afraid, but Enkidu tries to interpret the dreams positively for Gilgamesh, telling him they are signs of victory. So together they go deeper into the cedar forest until they finally arrive. Humbaba sends out a great roar, and Gilgamesh's courage begins to shake, but Enkidu reassures him of their strength, destiny, and the glory they came to achieve. Then the battle begins. Earth trembles, mountains shake as the two attack Humbaba together. The sun god Shamash sends powerful winds to aid, trapping Humbaba. Now defeated, Humbaba begs for mercy, offering his servitude and treasures. Gilgamesh hesitates before laying the final blow, and Enkidu warns him not to trust Humbaba and to hurry and lay the final blow before the gods intervene. Right before the two strike down Humbaba, he curses Enkidu and calls doom upon him. This worried Enkidu. After killing Humbaba, the two cut down sacred cedar trees and carry them back to Uruk as trophies of victory. On their return, they wash and rejoice with each other, but the next moment changes everything. Gilgamesh, standing glorified after his victory, catches the eye of Ishtar, the goddess of war, love, desire, fertility, and political warfare, or political power. Ishtar is one of the most important and powerful goddesses in Mesopotamia. She sees Gilgamesh in his glory and desires to have him. Ishtar approaches Gilgamesh directly and offers him marriage, promising him kingship, power, and dominion. Gilgamesh refuses her offer harshly, listing off the fates of the previous lovers, and he was not wrong, seeing that her previous husbands had been a shepherd turned into a wolf, a lion trapped, a horse driven to misery, and the rest falling to ruin after receiving her affection. Ishtar became enraged because Gilgamesh didn't just refuse her, he publicly humiliated her. So she ascended to the heavens before her father, Anu, and asked for the bull of heaven, which represented destruction, famine, and cosmic wrath, for revenge on Gilgamesh. At first, her father Anu hesitates, knowing the destruction that the bull could cause. But Ishtar threatens that she will be even worse if the bull is not released to her. So Anu decides to give her the bull, knowing the chaos his daughter could cause with her own power. The bull crashes into the earth and tears through the land like a divine catastrophe. But Gilgamesh and Enkidu show no fear. Enkidu grabs the bull by its tail while Gilgamesh strikes, and together they kill the bull. And then a line was crossed. Enkidu tears the leg off of the bull and launches it at Ishtar, an act of complete disrespect to the goddess, openly mocking her divinity and authority. At this point, these two, they killed her Baba, violated a sacred land, rejected and insulted a major goddess, and they killed the bull of heaven. In heaven, man, they ain't too happy. So the gods gather and hold council for the actions taken against them. No way could they couldn't let this slide. Not such blatant disrespect. They couldn't let that go unpunished. So they decided that one of them must die. And the one who will die is Enkidu. One night, Enkidu has a terrible dream that the gods gathered in assembly and decided that the death would be his fate. When he wakes, he knows that something is wrong and becomes overwhelmed with rage and despair, cursing the things that brought him into this world, like the trapper who found him and Shamat who civilized him. In his grief, he believed that if he had never come to the human world, he would have never suffered this fate. Just think about that literature right there. Enkidu is realizing the cost of becoming human. Then Shamash, the sun god, speaks to Enkidu, reminding him of the wonderful experiences that he had, the honor, the love, the brother he found in Gilgamesh. Enkidu softens, and instead of cursing Shamat for bringing him into civilization, he blesses her. Even though Enkidu suffers, he now knows his meaning in life. Everyone has a part to play, and sometimes we don't get to choose. We make decisions but how we affect what's on the outside, that isn't always up to us. As people lose, people gain. Enkidu's condition starts to worsen as time goes, and Gilgamesh stays by his side. But during his sickness, he describes a terrifying vision of the underworld, a dark house beneath the earth where kings and commoners are equal, sitting in the dust and darkness. This was the thought of the Mesopotamian afterlife. This realization destroys Enkidu emotionally. Finally, after days of suffering, Enkidu dies. This crushes Gilgamesh's heart. The closest thing he had ever had was Enkidu. Gilgamesh panics at the realization that someday he must also die. Gilgamesh sits next to Enkidu's decaying body for days until he starts to notice the signs of the decomposition going on. Going through the grief of his dead brother, Gilgamesh openly weeps, tearing his clothes while wandering in grief. Gilgamesh starts to become obsessed with finding a way to escape death. There is only one holy man who achieved immortality, and that is Utnapishtim, the survivor of the ancient flood. Gilgamesh sets out to find him and leaves Uruk behind, wandering the wilderness like his brother Enkidu once did. Gilgamesh wears animal skins and becomes restless and untamed as grief transforms him. He travels distant lands, up mountains, and across deserts towards the edge of the world, and eventually he reaches the twin-peaked mountain called Mashu, where the sun rises and sets. Guarding its gates are terrifying scorpion men. They ask Gilgamesh, "Why have you come this far?" Gilgamesh tells them of the death of his brother Enkidu and what it has done to him, admitting that he is afraid to die. The scorpion men are moved by this, and they allow Gilgamesh to pass through, but they warn him of the horrifying path ahead. Gilgamesh must travel through complete darkness to reach his desired destination. And finally, after a long travel through darkness, Gilgamesh sees light again. As Gilgamesh proceeds into the light, he realizes this is not just an ordinary land. This land is supernatural, like a garden of the gods. There, near the edge of the cosmic sea, he encounters Siduri, the divine tavern keeper. She sees Gilgamesh approaching from afar, and seeing that he is covered in dirt and his clothes all torn and he looking all raggedy, at first sight, she like, no, she's afraid of him. He looked like a wandering madman. When Gilgamesh reaches her, she asks why his face is worn down and why there is sorrow in his heart. Gilgamesh tells her of everything that led to his pursuit of immortality. Siduri tells Gilgamesh that humans were not created for immortality. That is when the gods made mankind. They kept eternal life for themselves. And then something else. And then she said something basically close to fill your belly, be joyful, and wear clean clothes, love the child who holds your hand, rejoice with your wife, and embrace. And in other words, live your life while you can. This is the ancient Mesopotamian philosophy basically confronting mortality. It's confronting it head on. Siduri is basically telling Gilgamesh that you are chasing something mankind was never meant to possess, but Gilgamesh, he can't accept this. His grief is too deep. So Gilgamesh continues to demand directions to Utanapishtim, and Siduri finally tells him about the boatman who can cross the waters of death. Merely touching these waters can bring death, but Gilgamesh finds the boatman, Ushinabi. In frustration and grief, Gilgamesh mistakenly destroys stones that help the boat cross more easy. The exact meaning of the stones is debated due to the damaged tablet, but Ushinabi tells Gilgamesh to cut long poles from the forest to use one by one as some type of like paddle thing to cross without touching the deadly waters. Finally, after a long journey, Gilgamesh reaches Utanapishtim. Gilgamesh is shocked at the sight of Utanapishtim, thinking that he would like glow like a god or something, but Utanapishtim was just an old man. Gilgamesh asks how he joined the assembly of gods and found eternal life. Utanapishtim tells Gilgamesh of a long time before him, when Utanapishtim and his family were chosen to be the lone, just them, survivors of the flood, resulting in the gods granting him immortality. This epic is called the Atrahasis, and you can read it for free, or you could go back to my video that I previously made about great floods, or you can just wait for me to talk about it again. But Utanapishtim is Atrahasis in that epic. After Utanapishtim finished the story, he turned to Gilgamesh and asked, what makes you think immortality belongs to you? Utanapishtim gives Gilgamesh a test and says that if Gilgamesh wants to conquer death, then he must first conquer sleep, and tells him to stay awake for 6 days and 7 nights. Gilgamesh sits down determined to succeed and falls asleep almost immediately. While he sleeps, Utanapishtim's wife bakes a loaf of bread and sets it by him so he will know how long he has remained unconscious. Gilgamesh awakens, believing that he had barely slept at all, but the loaves of bread reveal the truth. Gilgamesh has failed after a long journey. He is no longer closer to immortality than when he had left Uruk. The journey is over, but then Utanapishtim's wife persuades him to basically tell Gilgamesh something before he leaves. Don't let him leave empty-handed. So Utanapishtim gave Gilgamesh, I guess, a little secret. And he told him of a plant that did not grant immortality, but it was capable of restoring youth. The plant was hidden deep beneath the waters. So Gilgamesh tied heavy stones to his feet and dove in beneath the waters, and then he found it. And he was overwhelmed with joy at this. For the first time since the death of Enkidu, he felt a spark of hope. So Gilgamesh, he was pretty lit at that point. He was like, I got something. You know what I mean? I might not got immortality, but I can reverse my aging, I guess. So Gilgamesh, he didn't immediately use the plant on himself. He decided that he would take it back to Uruk and first test it on the old man, which is, I don't know, honorable. It seemed like he changed a little bit, you know what I'm saying? But I don't know. He might be like, this might kill me, so test it on somebody who finna die anyway. You never know. But yeah, he didn't go ahead and he said, I'm gonna wait. So he began the journey back home, and he stopped and bathed in a cool bath along the way. While he was distracted, a serpent smelled the plant and ate it. Gilgamesh stared in horror as the serpent slithered away, shedding its skin. Gilgamesh completely breaks down. The plant gone. Enkidu is gone, and immortality is out of reach. He returns to Uruk with the understanding that he will not live forever. He began the story trying to dominate the world like a god, and ended up being forced to understand what it was to be human. Gilgamesh, Gilgamesh, Gilgamesh. You gotta love that story. I'll catch y'all on the flip side.